Hmm. Well,
So
good.
I found a reasonable mechanic, which was also good because that's one thing I did not have here, which I always like on my list, is someone I can trust to take my car to. So
Amen. By the way, I meant to ask you, have you arranged with Tim your lodging in Helena?
I haven't. I have that on my list tomorrow to do that, and then also to
I mean, because he's
go.
reserved a lot of bed and breakfast for people who are coming, and if they don't think to take these spaces that he has reserved, he has to give them up on May 1st. So
Okay, I'll get that done this week because I have it on my list
right.
tomorrow too to sign up for the Yellowstone and the water. Because I signed up first, all those buttons weren't available yet.
Yeah.
And now they're all up and running.
Right. Pretty much.
Yes. Thanks for the reminder.
Okay. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You are hearing us talk about our Confluence for this summer, which is June 10th to 14th. We hope you'll join us. And it is in Helena, Montana. And if you come to it, you can hit one item on your bucket list, which is to go see Yellowstone with us at the same time. And we're going to have a lot of fun. Putting the link onto the YouTube chat so that you can find out what we're talking about. And I hope you will join us because we're going to have a lot of fun. However many people are there, we're going to have fun. And tomorrow I'm going to invite about 100 churches, or at least the pastors at 100 churches to attend. And
cool.
And at least attend the play, because the play is it's really about Ukraine and Russia too right now. I mean, the topic is, okay, now that you've got a war, how do you reconcile after the war? And
well, it's interesting
how to do that.
I saw, was it Retard General? Well, I can't remember his name. Not Schwarzkopf. I was way back. Recently, dark brown hair. But he was on CNN, and they were going over, there's like 5 Russian generals that they've just picked off, and because there's no gumption or get it doneness up in the front lines, and so they get up there and they're meandering around doing what they're doing. Plus, they're trying to clear room by room, and that takes forever anyway. Even if you are into it, the generals will go up, walk out, and then snipers bam. Yeah, I mean it's interesting.
I read today they don't have any leadership at the front, and that's a problem.
Yeah, and there's not a whole lot of self-motivation up at the front either.
Yeah.
Now that most of them thought that they were going out on maneuvers, and now they're they're stealing Ukrainian phones from people so they can actually communicate, because they had to go to single channel, and that's easy to take down. I mean, well, not for me, but for people who know what they're doing.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So
so we know who's got a incompetent army now. It's nice
and who has the upper hand. So that's destroying one myth and enhancing to me, the leadership of the Ukraine is, that's stunning.
Yeah, they're doing an amazing job of holding that together. Okay, so tonight we're going to start with paragraph 225 of this essay called Phenomena Resulting from the Assimilation of the Unconscious. And so what he seems to be talking about here, and mind you, this is an essay that was written in 1916 or something like that. So he may not have even really thought this at the end of his career, but anyway, I promised Nick that we would blast through this. So, but
Yeah, is he not coming because we're basically wander off topic, or he had other things to do?
well, he's a pretty busy fellow.
Busy.
He's got a job and a full-time
Okay.
school, and
Oh, that's presumed. That's true. Okay.
yeah, and so I mean, I wrote to him today and said, "What's the story?" But anyway, good evening, Justin. Nice to see you. We had Jewel here with us. Maybe we'll have others, but in any case, we are pressing on. So I will read this, and this is kind of sort of talking about people who are practicing psychotherapy. Let's see how it works. And I'll read the first one, and then I'll give you a chance to read this time, Jordan.
That's fine. I got a total buy on Sunday.
Yeah. Okay. Since human nature is not compounded wholly of light, duh, no kidding, but also abounds in shadows, the insight gained in practical analysis is often somewhat painful. The more so if, as is generally the case, one has previously neglected the other side. So what he's talking about is an analyst who has neglected the shadow side, and then all of a sudden shadow stuff starts coming out from his patients, and he has to analyze his own shadow.
And also that applies to the patients, where a lot of people I notice, they're all love and light, and it sounds really nice, but in the end, it's not kind, because they're all fine when it's all love and light and Hallmark cards, unicorns, and rainbows. But when they don't get what they want, gnashing teeth and claws come out, and it's a little 4-year-old tantrum. And I'm not blaming them or shaming them, but what happens then is that just simply tells me, okay, they're working too much for the light and there's an imbalance with the dark. Maybe they don't know any better because, it's dark, it's scary, it's beastie. Some people are like, no, I'm not going in there. Just like Star Wars, is Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker going to go into the cave? Well, most people would say no. So, I can't blame or shame people, but that's going on here too.
Right. Okay. So I'm not too clear about whether we're talking about the analyst or the patient here, but hence there are people who take their newly won insight very much to heart, far too much, in fact, quite forgetting that they are not unique in having a shadow side. They allow themselves to get unduly depressed and are then inclined to doubt everything, finding nothing right anywhere.
That's the Christmas playing with a new toy and forgetting everything else for a second.
Right. Okay. Hold on just a second. I'm take this. Just a second. Okay. That whoever that was on my cell phone. Okay. Moving on. That is why, all right, so finding nothing right anywhere. That is why many excellent analysts with very good ideas can never bring themselves to publish them because of the psychic problem, as they see it, is so overwhelmingly vast that it seems to them almost impossible to tackle it scientifically. One man's optimism makes him overweening, while another's pessimism makes him over anxious and despondent. Such are the forms which the great conflict takes when reduced to a smaller scale. But even in these lesser proportions, the essence of the conflict is easily recognized. The arrogance of the one and the despondency of the other share a common uncertainty as to their boundaries. The one is excessively expanded and the other excessively contracted. their individual boundaries are in some way obliterated. If we now consider the fact that as a result of psychic compensation, great humility stands very close to pride, and that pride goeth before a fall, we can easily discover behind the haughtiness certain traits of an anxious sense of inferiority. In fact, we shall see clearly how his uncertainty forces the enthusiast to puff up his truths, of which he feels none too sure, and to win proselytes to his side in order that his followers may prove to himself the value and trustworthiness of his own convictions. Nor is he altogether so happy in his fund of knowledge as to be able to hold out alone. At bottom, he feels isolated by it, and the secret fear of being left alone with it induces him to trot out his opinions and interpretations in and out of season, because only when convincing someone else does he feel safe from gnawing doubts. Okay.
Mm-hmm. That last set of sentences, or that last sentence, it reminds me of, living in Tornado Alley, and when the pressure drops all of a sudden and nothing in the world is supporting you.
Yeah.
You are simply held together by you. And there's a psychological experience that occurs the first 1 or 2 times, 3 times that happens, where, I'm not one to have much anxiety. And it was like, I'm going to die. What's going on? I've never experienced this before. This is so out of, so the fantasy hips up to get the adrenaline running, except you don't know what to do because there's no pressure. So as if there's no cornerstone to brace against. But then I use that now as an example of when people are alone, do they have solitude or do they have a loneliness? And I find that when you are depressured, when you are truly alone, do you have to hold it together, or do you naturally have a sense of yourself that now is simply a new experience? Instead of I'm falling apart or I'm not being held together, that means you are either living your own capital S self held together. Your boundaries are intact, they're comfortable, and there's an unthreatened quality even when threats occur. And I find that makes the distinction between fear is simply an environmental and inner radar. It tells me what's up inside and outside. Whereas being afraid is when anxiety and despair hijack fear and run away with it with a bunch of afraidness. And that's the danger. That's the panic. That's the place of where he's talking about these obliterated boundaries, where when you have to look at your own boundaries on your own with your own responsibility, how do they feel? And right. I think this last sentence or 2 really dials into that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been reading the Red Book the last couple of days, and I was reading the section called The Anchorite. And then there's a later section called Death. And in The Anchorite, Jung is trying to understand how the anchorite, who's somebody who's gone out into the desert to study the Bible and nothing else. Okay. And there were a lot of these types of monks in the early Christian era. For several hundred years, people used to just go out in the desert and set up camp in a cave and live on nothing and study the Bible. And they do gain wisdom, but excuse me. So they separate in the Red Book. Jung and he's separated, and then they meet again, and the anchorite is accusing Jung of destroying his balance, and he shows up with death, literally, with another person type thing that is death. Anyway.
Well, no, that's really apt, I think, for the same thing as the tornado and the depressurization, because death is present there. That's what's so wiggy. That's what's so generating. But a couple times in, you're like, oh, it's just noise. Oh, it's just like a pressure, and I'm fine. It's just different. But you're not blindsided by the difference. So, I mean, bringing death in is quite a counterbalance, I'll say. It's like,
yeah, no kidding.
How do you get on his schedule?
Yeah.
Get it.
Okay. So going on, let's read paragraph 226.
Okay. Paragraph 226. It is just the reverse with our despondent friend. The more he withdraws and hides himself, the greater becomes his secret need to be understood and recognized. Although he speaks of his inferiority, he does not really believe it. There arises within him a deviant or a defiant conviction of his unrecognized merits, and in consequence, he is sensitive to the slightest disapprobation, always wearing the stricken air of one who is misunderstood and deprived of his rightful due. In this way, he nurses a morbid pride and an insolent discontent, which is the very last thing he wants, and for which his environment has to pay all the more dearly. Thoughts, or shall I read the next paragraph?
Yeah, keep going, because I don't have any thoughts on that one.
Okay. Both are at once too small and too big. Their individual mean, never very secure, now becomes shakier than ever. It sounds almost grotesque to describe such a state as godlike, in quotes. But since each in his way steps beyond his human proportions, both of them are a little superhuman, in quotes, and therefore, figuratively speaking, godlike. If we wish to avoid the use of this metaphor, I would suggest that we speak instead of psychic inflation, in quotes. The term seems to me appropriate insofar as the state we are discussing involves an extension of the personality. Beyond such a state, a man fills a space which normally he cannot fill. He can only fill it by appropriating to himself contents and qualities which properly exist for themselves alone and should therefore remain outside our bounds. What lies outside ourselves belongs either to someone else or to everyone, or to no one, since psychic inflation is by no means a phenomenon induced exclusively by analysis, but it occurs just as often in ordinary life. We can invest it equally well in other cases. A very common instance is the humorless way in which many men identify themselves with their business or their titles. The office I hold is certainly my special activity, but it is also a collective factor that has come into existence historically through the cooperation of many people and whose dignity rests solely on collective approval. When therefore I identify myself with my office or title, I behave as though I myself were the whole complex of social factors which that office consists, or as though I were not only the bearer of the office, but also, and at the same time, the approval of society. I have made an extraordinary extension of myself and have usurped qualities which are not in me, but outside me. L'état c'est moi is the motto for such people. And that's the state of me.
Right.
The state of this is me. So
yeah, the state is me.
The state is me.
Yeah, that's
L'état c'est moi.
Word stolen from Vladimir Putin. Right?
Yep.
So, I can relate to this in the sense that this comes up when we have to have our name on nameplate on our desk or some other identifying feature. And it could be, in my case, I put Donald L. Conover, attorney at law, on my mailbox on a rural road, and so what does attorney at law say about me? It says I'm trying to take upon myself all the presumably good things that you happen to think about lawyers. That okay,
Yeah, that's a good
I'm a
point.
lawyer, so therefore I'm a good guy. Okay.
Well, look at our business cards. I put
Yeah.
founder, the architecture of well-being. Well,
Right.
HOK, the huge architecture firm, they have the architecture of well-being, but that's space. And I'm dealing with more psychological tarot astrology.
Right.
But the fact that when I put that on there, let's say when I had tarot professional or astrologer, people are like, oh, okay, that's cool. But
Mhm.
now the founder, the architecture well-being, they'll go thick. I like that.
Mhm.
And so it kind of, for the first time, transcended their persona, but it became there's some, like you said, Donald L. Conover, attorney at law. It transcends to actually say something. And the words are actually a symbol, I think, that resonate with people. They get it.
Sure. I mean, obviously they say this is not the residence of Donald L. Conover. This is the residence of somebody who has gone to law school, been admitted to the practice of law at the minimum.
Right. Past the bar.
Yeah. And therefore licensed to practice law. And my inclination is never to put anything on my car that distinguishes me from anybody else. Okay. So I never, I do have sort of a vanity license plate. It's one that means a lot to me, but it doesn't mean a hell of a lot to most people. and because it's an archetypal symbol and an alchemical symbol that relates to the tarot, and so I know that, but almost no one else knows that, and so that license plate just makes me feel better. It doesn't say, oh wow, I'm a lawyer, or I never put a sticker on my car saying I'm a Marine. And and I don't go, I mean, I sometimes mention it here, but I almost never talk about it outside of using it as an example of something that happened to me, probably. Yeah.
Well, I'm the same way. People say, when you were in the construction industry, and architecture, you would have signs on your car. I said, yeah, that got me business. I said, but I'm not in a mainstream profession anymore. I want to see them coming at my table. I don't want some guy just to bash me from the back in some, dually or whatever, and, or another Subaru or whatever. But there's a discretion piece where I don't want to fly my flag through the wind indiscriminately. I mean, you get the wrong clients that way, honestly. Right. And at the same time, I'm in my car. I'm obviously not reading. I'm not in session. So there's kind of a take and a break. But I also too, I just feel like, I don't know, bumper stickers are like tattoos on cars. And even if you remove them, then the paint, you can tell they were there.
Right. And it's the same for tattoos. I think that, some people through their tattoos are saying something about their unconscious or their inner self. Right. Mm-hmm. So a woman that has a beautiful flower across her entire back, let's say, or some other really beautiful thing, what she's saying is, I'm beautiful inside, right? And you can see me at the beach, and I'm saying I'm beautiful inside, regardless of what I really look like. And I don't feel the need to tell anybody about my inside.
Well, and that's, I agree. The closest I ever got to getting a tattoo was getting a dolphin on my calf. And at the same time, then I didn't, because it's a dolphin on my calf. I'm like, it's still, well, how original is that? And then I finally came to it's about what's inside. It's about what resonates with me. And at the same time, as soon as I do it, it's not new anymore. So I won't know whether I wanted to do it or not until the day after. And then it's too late.
Then it's too late. So Kathy Kerr is here. Kathy, hi.
Hey, Kathy.
And we have to mention to you that if you haven't made if you don't have reservations for a bed and breakfast for our Confluence yet, you might want to get that under control soon, because we've made a lot of reservations for people that are there for the taking, and I got a very, very good rate, which I mean, I can be in Helena for a whole week for the price of one night in a hotel in Washington, D.C. these days. And so those are available. We've reserved them in advance for people, but please make sure you let us know if you're interested in one of those, because as of about May 1st, we have to release them if we're not going to use them. And so this is going to be a really special week where you're going to have an opportunity to be with all these people, and then to have the Yellowstone tour with some locals, which includes Tim, of course, and I think it's going to be an amazing thing. But don't get yourself closed out if you're planning to come. I hope you're planning to come. And so,
don't put the pro in procrastination.
Right, because we're going to hold the bed and breakfast reservations we made until May 1st, and then if we haven't filled them all, we may let some of them go. So, and then it will be too late later to get in there. So, hi, Patrick. Good evening. All right. So 228, you want to read that?
Surely. Paragraph 228. In the case of inflation through knowledge, we are dealing with something similar in principle, though psychologically more subtle. Here it is not the dignity of an office that causes the inflation, but very significant fantasies. I will explain what I mean by a practical example. Choosing a mental case whom I happen to know personally and who is also mentioned in a publication by Mater, which is dementia praecox. It probably looks like German, for like psychology of dementia praecox, with footnote 2. Where was I? The case is characterized by a high degree of inflation. Parenthetically, in mental cases, we can observe all the phenomena that are present only fleetingly in normal people, in a cruder and enlarged form. And I think it's important to read this footnote. It's textual. When I was still a doctor at the psychiatric clinic in Zurich, I once took an intelligent layman through the sick wards. He had never seen a lunatic asylum from the inside before. When we had finished our round, he exclaimed, "I tell you, it's just like Zurich in miniature." A quintessence of the population. It is as though all the types one meets every day on the streets have been assembled here in their classical purity. Nothing but oddities and picked specimens from top to bottom of society. I had never looked at it from this angle before, but my friend was not far wrong.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
And and we see this, in today's world, every which way but loose. But go ahead and finish the paragraph, and then we'll
Okay.
talk about it.
The patient suffered from paranoid dementia with megalomania. He was in telephonic communication with the Mother of God, in capitals, and other great ones. In human reality, he was a wretched locksmith's apprentice who, at the age of 19, had become incurably insane. He had never been blessed with intelligence, but he had, among other things, hit upon the magnificent idea that the world was his picture book, the pages of which he could turn at will. The proof was quite simple. He had only to turn around and there was a new page for him to see.
Yeah. Okay. So,
yeah. This reminds me of that Argentinian film, Man Facing Southeast, where the man's admitted to the lunatic asylum. And every morning he walks out in the courtyard and he turns southeast and he stands and stares southeast every day. And then he goes in the afternoon to paint and paints into the night and sleeps. And then after a while, they turn him loose again. And this happens 3 or 4 times. And then on like the 3rd or 4th time, the chief of police says, Warden, how do you know? I mean, I can't call this man a recidivist because every time we bring him in, it's for something different. He's not repeating. But how do you know to admit him? How do you know to let him back out? And he goes, well, the admission part is only because you brought him here. Mm-hmm. I have no idea. But letting him back out, I only let him back out when his art goes to shit. Then he's ready to be back in society. And what happens there is it makes the whole statement that society itself are the crazy ones, and he's protected from them with his artistic intensity to go paint in the lunatic asylum, get some good, solid, creative work done, and then when that peters out, they throw him back to the masses. So it's interesting that it makes the statement of it's not the people in the lunatic asylum that are the crazy ones; it's the ones who are just boring and trotting along that are really the ones who are sick.
Yeah, well, the image that came to me was, I wonder if Donald Trump has a telephone line, a red phone to God or God's wife. And and it turns out that Putin is very much like him, but Putin can't even pull off a good rally, right?
Yeah. Trump probably has a red phone that's just sentimental, that was connected to Playboy Mansion until they realized it was him and they cut him off.
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, those people at the rally for Putin the other day, they're waving their flags very lackadaisically, and you could see that they were just bored out of their skulls. And I mean, they weren't even getting revved up like they do for Trump.
Well, what's interesting about that too is that also I think that they're trying to also play an antidote to that lack of effectiveness by promoting the propaganda in the kindergartens.
Mm-hmm.
And basically see if they can mold something later. But yeah, you're right.
Which is nuts, because they're not going to survive long enough to make that impact. I mean, back in the good old USSR days, when things went on for 3 or 4 decades, you could hope to mold somebody's psyche in school. And, maybe you still can a little bit in China, but, today, you have no hope, because as soon as people have access to the internet and to social networking, and they will insist on it, the Russian young people at some point soon, and by soon I mean 1 to 3 years from now, are going to insist that they have access to the real internet. And I know that in the case of the Chinese, they already have it. They just find ways to go around their government.
Well, yeah, with apps and such. It was interesting that the lackadaisical flag waving. I leaned in and visually started to try to discern if somehow the video had been edited to be slowed down because the sound was normal, and then started Googling how to resume normal speed on video, and thinking that somehow on my computer some setting got jacked, and there's no setting like that. It's not like a voicemail that you can put at 3/4 or half and slow it down to transcribe. But when I saw the lackadaisical, it was so surprising that I actually started listening to the sound to sync with the images. But I was like, no, they're really going that slow.
Right. And it was, it was supposed to be live, but there was this instant cutoff after 5 minutes of Putin. And so it obviously wasn't live. And it makes you wonder what may have happened in the stadium at that moment. And
well, it's like everyone got their break from work. You go to the stadium for your break and then come back, and that's when they cut
them. Yeah. So anyway, I mean, he doesn't even have handlers that are able to hype up a crowd like Trump's handlers do. I mean, Trump's handlers at least can make their crowd sound big, even if it's not big. And very often it's not very big.
Well, and also the cinematography of the video editing of understanding how to focus the view frame so it looks like a dense crowd, but they're really only 300 people. They're just 20 wide by, and then you think it's all across, but it's really you can still cross the street between them. I mean, they're really not that dense, so that making something look big on video is a movie trick.
Right. So that was a pretty desultory thing that he did last Friday, I thought.
Yeah.
And
it was desultory.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. You want to read this next paragraph, or is it my turn?
Actually, this was a longer one. It's one of my favorites. I'll take it.
Okay, go for it.
Paragraph 229. This is Schopenhauer's, in quotes, world as will and idea, in unadorned primitive concreteness of vision. A shattering idea indeed, born of extreme alienation and seclusion from the world, but so naively and simply expressed that at first one can only smile at the grotesqueness of it. And yet this primitive way of looking lies at the very heart of Schopenhauer's brilliant vision of the world. Only a genius or a madman could so disentangle himself from the bonds of reality as to see the world as his picture book. Did the patient actually work out or build up such a vision, or did it just befall him? Or did he perhaps fall into it? His pathological disintegration and inflation point, rather to the latter, who fell into it. It is no longer he, in italics, that thinks and speaks, but it, in italics, thinks and speaks within him. He hears voices. So the difference between him and Schopenhauer is that in him, the vision remained at the stage of a mere spontaneous growth, while Schopenhauer abstracted it and expressed it in language of universal validity. In so doing, he raised it out of its subterranean beginnings into the clear light of collective consciousness. But it would be quite wrong to suppose that the patient's vision had a purely personal character or value, as though it were something that belonged to him. If that were so, he would be a philosopher. A man is a philosopher of genius only when he succeeds in transmuting the primitive and merely natural vision into an abstract idea belonging to the common stock of consciousness. This achievement, and this alone, constitutes his personal value. for which he may take credit without necessarily succumbing to inflation. But the sick man's vision is an impersonal value, a natural growth against which he is powerless to defend himself, by which he is actually swallowed up and, in quotes, wafted clean out of the world. Far from his mastering the idea and expanding it into a philosophical view of the world, it is truer to say that the undoubted grandeur of his vision blew him up to pathological proportions. The personal value lies entirely in the philosophical achievement, not in the primary vision. To the philosopher as well, this vision comes as so much increment, and is simply a part of the common property of mankind, in which, in principle, everyone has a share. The golden apples drop from the same tree, whether they be gathered by an imbecile locksmith's apprentice or by a Schopenhauer.
You connect with that?
I do, because I see people, oh my God, I had that $1 million idea 6 weeks ago, and oh my God, look, they're making so much money. And I'm like, did you do anything with it?
Yeah.
And what's interesting is there's that, when he says it takes the idea from the subterranean beginnings, the raw form of an idea, to then craft it and groom it and develop it and grow it, where then there's a Schopenhauer where he comes to an abstraction that makes it not of the common stock of the unconscious, of just these little pieces, but it comes in the increment to work into the weaving tapestry of everything else. So there's something that's actually made from it, which then Jung's quote, "You are what you do, not what you say you are going to do." The one whose world is his picture is just saying what he's going to do, or he's just saying things. Right. And then Schopenhauer is actually, he is what he is doing, with the title of philosopher. And then there goes back to, Donald L.
Right.
Conover, attorney at law,
Yeah,
Schopenhauer,
right.
Philosopher. Jordan, who the hell knows what he is? I mean, so.
Yeah, well, I've really stopped trying to sell myself based on those things, because what I found was that a university degree, even if you get several of them, each one gets you one job.
Right.
But otherwise, how are you that much different from, it's like asking you, Jordan, how much different are you from someone who's never studied tarot or astrology, but picks up a good book about it and a deck of cards and starts to spout off, right? I mean, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say, go ahead.
Well, so, you contain within yourself huge potential for things you could say, but the other person maybe has something rote that they can say based on the cards, let's say. And from the point of view of the person who's having the reading, the result could be equal. Right.
It could be. And then I think my metaphor there would be, they have to fill a clip, stick it in the gun, take off the safety, and then go in. I just start walking forward. So yeah. I don't need the gun, so to speak. But
right.
It's interesting to me too that in some interview years back, someone asked me about, college and architecture, and trying to triple major in psychology, philosophy, and architecture. Second semester, psychology drops off, and then second year, I'm like, oh, I can't do this many 30-page papers in philosophy with this many design studios staying up all night. So it ends up with architecture. But they said, well, you don't refer to your architectural education much. I said, look, I had a wonderful architectural education. I had some of the best teachers. I tried to make sure I took people who failed 70% of the class, because I meant, one, they're not tenured, and two, they can do that. and they will. And they're not going, you put the effort in, here's your B. But my joke was, no, it took me 10, 15 years to forget all that BS that was stuffed in my head and get back to what it is that I do here. So in a sense, to actually, it took that long to digest that. It's like, what do we all have 15 pounds of red meat in our undigested red meat in our intestines or something? That was college. I had to clear that stuff out.
Yeah. And what I found about law school was basically they taught me how to use the law library.
Yeah. And Westlaw probably. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. They didn't even teach me Westlaw because I was in law school before Westlaw.
Before Westlaw. That's true. Yeah. Okay. So I think back to your point, if someone picks up a book and starts spouting rote, I started when I was like 7 and the pictures just told me stories. I didn't read a book for 16 years later, and I had already done professional readings. And so I think what's interesting is most people who will spit out rote, they could probably accomplish a 10 to 20 minute reading, but they don't have the storytelling.
Yeah.
And to me, half an hour is usually plenty. Hours, we're going to explore multiple topics. But I've had people who spit rote at me, and I just go quiet and listen to see how long they can carry it out.
Right.
How much the talking head's going to happen. And what's interesting is then I'll see someone else who gets spit rote at them, and you could tell they're gone. They're like, nah, it makes too much sense to mean anything.
Right. It's like my MBA school, which was a Chicago school. So it's Milton Friedman's all statistics all the time. And I joke that my business school was 15 courses in statistics by different names.
Right.
But
taxes and statistics. It's like,
but then I got out into business, and in, let's see, how many years is it now? 43 years since I graduated from the MBA program. I never once ran a statistical analysis. And I'm convinced that the only time that it would be useful is if you worked for the census or something, because that's the only, or maybe if you're trying to run some algorithms and you're a genius algorithm writer for Wall Street or something like that. But if you're not that and you're just out in business, that MBA does you precious little. So when I was considering going to the business school, I found out that my primary gunnery instructor from the Marines was running the NROTC unit at the University of Rochester. He was a major at the time. And I was a major in the reserve. And so he was a year ahead of me in the program. And so I invited him out to lunch one day, and I said, well, Jack, why are you here? I mean, you're a professional Marine officer, you're going to serve to colonel or whatever it is. Why are you taking this MBA program? And he said, so that now nobody can bullshit me.
Well, that's awesome, because my 2 favorite professors who ended up becoming my thesis advisors independently said to me, Jordan, stop these statistical permutations, telling us everything telling us everything that's wrong. Yeah. You know what happens, Jordan, when you know everything that's wrong? They said, first, you reach infinity, and that's impossible. But second, when you know everything that's wrong, that's just vague.
Yeah.
You need to figure out what the heart of this is, and odds are when you do, no one else will have seen that, because only you can see it your way. But I love that he's like, so no one can bullshit me. So he will hear their permutations of the the not thing. He's like, screw that. What are we actually doing?
Right. And so this can free all of our listeners, because now you don't have to listen to any of the statistics that they tell you about on TV, because they're entirely meaningless.
Well, and I love it was somewhere back here where, the initial idea, it reminded me of Mark Twain. But, a new idea is always a really crack idea until it catches on,
Yeah.
and then everyone's like, oh, how did we not see that? Well, last year you were against it, and,
Right.
now you see the light, but you're a year late. So,
Right. Yeah, we can talk about that more, but let's go on.
yeah, I think before we do, I just love the golden apples drop from the same tree, whether they be gathered by an imbecile locksmith's apprentice or by a Schopenhauer.
Yeah.
So, so that means, how well do you use your tools?
Yeah, that's a great point. I do like that idea that we all have access to all these great things,
Right.
and what do we take from them, and do we have enough common sense to take something from them?
Right.
And oh boy, it's the story of my life that I when others see problems, I see opportunity.
Yeah, to me, that don't waste trouble. That's where the treasure lives. It's
Yeah.
like, well, even when people say, "Oh, you can't do that," and you just point, down to the table because you've already done it.
Right. Here we are.
Here we are.
Okay, so there is, however, yet another thing to be learned from this example, namely that these transpersonal contents are not just inert or dead matter that can be annexed at will. Rather, they are living entities that exert an attractive force upon the conscious mind. Identification with one's office or one's title is very attractive indeed, which is precisely why so many men are nothing more than the decorum accorded to them by society. In vain would one look for a personality behind the husk. Underneath all the padding, one would find a very pitiable little creature. That is why the office, or whatever this outer husk may be, is so attractive. It offers easy compensation for personal deficiencies. Yeah, and so we have a perfect example of this in Maryland, where there's this elderly attorney who specializes in tax law. And so every year at tax time, he gets on the television and says, call me for your tax problems. I'll solve your tax problems. He's in his late 70s at this point, I would say. And so he's riding his horse in, that he's an attorney and he knows something about tax. And he's giving you his phone number in case you have a tax problem. But that's it. I mean, he's basically, and he's not even that husk anymore. That same ad has been playing for at least a decade, and more than that, maybe. I think I probably have been seeing that same ad for about 15 or 20 years. So he could easily already be 90 for all I know.
Yeah, that's a great example, because I mean, my perspective, say in regards to taxes, and I intend no tax advice to anyone whatsoever in this next following statement, but is what my accountant told me years ago. She said, "Oh, Jordan, don't worry about making a mistake. They'll let you know." And my eyes, they'll let you. And my eyes got big. She goes, no, not by showing up at your doorstep. She goes, you do not have 7, 8, 9, 10 figures. You do not have a complex business. You're a sole prop, for Christ's sakes, a sole proprietor. She said, your taxes are, do you itemize that or do you not? do you include that in the itemization or not? She goes, you need to lose that problem, that fear, because don't worry, they'll let you know. And I just remember talking to an IRS agent, and I said, I was really worried about making a mistake here last year on this, and as you've shown me, I did it correctly. And she said, oh, well, don't worry, we'll see it, we'll let you know.
Yeah. Well, they may or they may not. I mean, they have computers to help them today. Right. And even with computers, they only audit about, I don't know, 1.5 or 2% of all returns. And so I did have one year about a decade ago where I had forgotten a 1099, which was for like $100 or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so they say you owe us $9.99.
Right.
That
right.
was $9.99. I said, well, okay, sure. I wrote the check and sent it back. Yes. Rather than obsess over the tax return, just get the damn thing in and see what happens.
Well, and that's the strangest thing too. Yeah, it's something like that for $9.99. Or I remember years back, I had some kind of plan, and then I got way back on my feet, and I just lump sum paid it off. Well, 6 months later, I get a letter. There is this much interest that we owe you, and we may have already paid you in the last return. And all I went is, oh, that's the discrepancy of why the refund was larger, but I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I'm not doing amortization with.
Well, I saw something that said that the IRS was going to hire 10,000 people.
I hope for their sake they do, because last year they were overloaded. It was supposed to be 6 weeks, and it took 9 months for the refund. And I think for their sake, I hope they do, because I know they were so overloaded. In fact, they don't answer the phone. I mean, you have only specific lines for specific reasons, which are above my pay grade. Right. You can't get a person on the phone.
I can't get a person on the phone for anything. For doctors, my doctor's office, I never get anybody on the telephone anymore.
You can just set up
or you have to be willing to sit there for an hour and wait for them while they play you music. It's really atrocious what they've done to us now.
Yeah, because now it's just set up your online account, and then you can just hop in, check. Nope, not processed. Later, and you don't have to wait. Because I remember waiting 3 hours with it on hold, on speaker, while I'm doing something else. But I just had to spend the time, but I couldn't spend the time doing nothing else.
Yeah, well, the good thing is now they're saying, well, we have your call in, and we'll call you back when it's your turn. Do you want us to do that? And,
right.
That's a good thing. Okay, moving on.
Except they don't leave a voicemail, so you have to pick it up. And so if you happen to be in the bathroom, take your phone. So it's like, so then you end up putting an ankle bracelet and tie yourself to the phone.
Right. Well, I have that now. I have an iWatch, and so even if I've left my iPhone in the other room, I can answer the phone.
Okay.
And then I haven't figured out how to get the call back on the iPhone, so I keep having to talk to my telephone like Dick Tracy, right?
Yes. I'm going to do it. You want to do the next paragraph? I'm going to take a quick bio break.
Sure. Okay, 231. Outer attractions such as offices, titles, and other social regalia are not the only things that cause inflation. These are simply impersonal quantities that lie outside in society in the collective consciousness. But just as there is a society outside the individual, so there is a collective psyche outside the personal psyche, namely the collective unconscious, concealing, as the above example shows, elements that are no whit less attractive. And just as a man may suddenly step into the world on his professional dignity, Monsieur, à présent je suis roi, Sir, may I present myself, Roy. So another may disappear out of it equally suddenly when it is his lot to behold one of those mighty images that put a new face upon the world. These are the magical representation collective, collective representations, which underlie the slogan, the catchword, and on a higher level, the language of the poet and mystic. I am reminded of another mental case who was neither a poet nor anything very outstanding, just a naturally quiet and rather sentimental youth. He had fallen in love with a girl and, as so often happens, had failed to ascertain whether his love was required. His primitive participatio mystique took it for granted that his agitations were plainly the agitations of the other, which on the lower levels of human psychology is naturally very often the case. Thus, he built up a sentimental love fantasy, which precipitously collapsed when he discovered that the girl would have none of him. He was so desperate that he went straight to the river to drown himself. It was late at night and the stars gleamed up at him from the dark water. It seemed to him that the stars were swimming two by two down the river, and a wonderful feeling came over him. He forgot his suicidal intentions and gazed fascinated at the strange, sweet drama. And gradually he became aware that every star was a face, and that all these pairs were lovers who were carried along, locked in a dreamy embrace. An entirely new understanding came to him. All had changed. His fate, his disappointment, even his love receded and fell away. The memory of the girl grew distant, blurred, but instead, he felt with complete certainty that untold riches were promised him. He knew that an immense treasure lay hidden for him in the neighboring observatory. The result was that he was arrested by the police at 4 o'clock in the morning, attempting to break into the observatory. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay, so this was a lovesick chap who his mind went on a wander, and it ended up thinking, instead of I'm going to commit suicide because this girl doesn't like me, I'm going to go to this observatory and break in at 4 o'clock in the morning. Well, I think that's crazy. So let's go on. I don't think we need to talk about
I think the one thing I think I will pick out of this is, as a man may suddenly step into the world on his professional dignity, Messieurs, à présent je suis roi, which is Messieurs, à présent je suis roi, and that means, sirs, at present I am Roy, which means right before that and right after that he may not be Roy anymore, or roi. So there's a temporary but also very insane piece to this paragraph. He's lost. Okay, but yeah, we could continue.
Yeah, I might challenge your translation of French a little bit.
Please do, because I think at present I am.
He's saying
my name is Roy.
He says at present, or sirs, I present myself that I am Roy.
There you go.
Okay, he's just introducing himself.
Well, because that's just like Picasso's sketchbooks. It says, "Je suis le cahier de Picasso." I am the sketchbook of Picasso. So yeah, I'm presenting you're right about that.
Yeah. Okay, what had happened? His poor head had glimpsed a Dante-esque vision whose loveliness he could never have grasped had he read it in a poem. But he saw it, and it transformed him. What had hurt him most was now far away, a new and undreamed of world of stars tracing their silent courses far beyond this grievous earth, had opened out to him the moment he crossed Persephone's threshold. The intuition of untold wealth, and could any fail to be touched by this thought, came to him like a revelation. For his poor turnip head, it was too much. He did not drown in the river, but in an eternal image, and its beauty perished with him. Well, okay, so basically this was a guy that just got yanked from one vision to the next. He thought he had a girlfriend, and then that fell away, so that he thought he was going to be rich, and that fell away because he decided he was going to be rich by going to the observatory, and he was caught breaking in at 4 a.m. Yeah, that's crazy.
Well, it is crazy, and I think you're absolutely right. The proserpine's threshold, I mean, that's like he got sucked back into the unconscious, and several paragraphs before, he's lost in those huge dementia of fantasy only. And that's kind of Gamblers Anonymous, just one more until he's perished.
Okay. So Kathy says to us, Roy is also French for king. So Monsieur à présent je suis Roy. It means I am the king, with Kathy's translation, which is also a valid one, I guess. And
I think it's valid, except the French king is spelled R-O-I, and R-O-Y in Canadian French might be Waugh, pronounced like Patrick Waugh, the hockey goalie from the Denver Avalanche.
Well, sadly,
that's a good point.
There are too many people running around with delusions of grandeur that they are great peacemakers or what have you. And unfortunately, occasionally, those people get elevated to exalted levels. Examples are Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, and then other people die.
That's a good point. And it brings to mind that, is that the shadow side of creativity? Because with so many people following, is it that they don't have their own fantasies, or they aren't comfortable with their own fantasies? Someone else acting out their fantasy, especially in a relatively insane way, is actually magnetic to a certain personality that does not have their creativity anything but stifled. I mean, they're so locked down in job and any kind of compulsory. I mean, we have the compulsories in ice skating before the skating, just a bunch of boring figure eights, but they're graceful and simple. These are the tools. These are like the differential equations of the alphabet of calculus. But I think that those people elevated to those places, there may be that shadow side of creativity that they have no substance, but they are enacting the fantasy.
Well, or they have no capacity for reflection.
That's true too.
And reflection comes, or maturity comes with reflection, and right. And so, I don't know if you ever saw any of the audiences that Trump brought together. He hid them pretty well over the years, and mainly only showed you the people that were immediately behind him, who were obviously specially selected to be there and to do things right. But if he had shown you the rest of the audience, I did catch it a couple of times when somebody panned their camera around or something. He didn't allow it generally, but a lot of those people were not very reflective people, clearly, and you actually saw it on January 6, 2021, when you saw the people that were attracted to that, and sort of the level of their maturity and or intelligence was certainly lacking from my perspective.
I think there's that. I think at the same time too, if I step into the shoes of to not shame or disparage them and not play the idiot game, because if you call someone an idiot, it means you're an idiot usually. I mean, except for sometimes when you're right and they really are an idiot. But I started to realize that, yes, they're not reflective, but because of that, he's just fishing for their anger. And all he has to do is hook on something where it can be an us against them, and they'll feel like someone's working for them, even though he's not going to do anything. He's just going to fish, catch, and release their anger over and over and over.
Right. Well, right. So there's I don't know if you've seen this yet, but on HBO Max, there's now a new series called The Golden Age. And I've only looked at 2 of the episodes so far, but
anything like The Circus, or?
Well, it's more like Downton Abbey, I would say.
Okay.
But it's highfalutin New York City, and it's somewhat overemphasized, probably, overplayed in some ways, but it's just very interesting to see. And if you watch that, it really makes you reflect on yourself. And
I wrote that down. Is it close in any way to the series Billions on Showtime?
No. It's
not at all.
This is the Golden Age. So it's
like back from the early 20th century.
1886 it starts,
okay.
or 84 or something like that. And so it's before there were automobiles, and
so you're going towards the Carnegies and the Rockefellers and all that.
Right. And Lady Esther plays a part in the second episode. Lady Esther is in it, and a bunch of other people, railroad magnates, and of course almost none of the audience can directly relate to that level of living. It's like, in that sense, it's like Downton Abbey, where who goes out and works their farm and then comes back and washes and shaves and puts on white tie and tails to eat their dinner, right? Well, they were doing that in Downton Abbey, and I guess there was a period of time, let's say from in the U.S., it was probably immediately after the Civil War until World War I, I would say, or the crash. And in that period, there were a group of people that succeeded very well in industry. A lot of them made a lot of money, just as today some people have made a lot of money, but they have a golden moment, and then that goes away somehow. And it's like Steve Jobs made a lot of money, but he died at 54. And so so you have to put your life in balance a little bit. But so anyway, this was a group of people that were sort of in the first run of people that made a lot of money. Okay, the Carnegies, the Rockefellers, the Mellons, all these people, and
JP Morgan,
the Morgans.
Well, in that whole era, one of my old architectural jokes that usually only worked in the expert witness crowd with building code, zoning, and planning was, people are like, these windows in these high rises, none of them open, and they're double pane, and they're so strong, it's for the wind loading. I said, no, it's not. It's for the next stock market crash. So no one can jump through them or jump out of them.
Yeah, but as we saw at 9/11, people did manage to jump. That was pretty
Yeah, that was
horrific. And I guess if you have a choice of burning to get death and knowing you're burning to death, or jumping out a window so you get to have a quick death, who can blame them?
Yeah, that level of choice in the moment is.
Yeah. Anyway, all right, 233. Just as one man may disappear in his social role, so another may be engulfed in an inner vision and be lost in his surroundings. Many fathomless transformations of personality, like sudden conversions and other far-reaching changes of mind, originate in the attractive power of a collective image, which is at present, which as the present example shows, can cause such a high degree of inflation that the entire personality is disintegrated. This disintegration is a mental disease of a transitory or permanent nature, a splitting of the mind, or schizophrenia in Bleuler's term. The pathological inflation naturally depends on some innate weakness of the personality against the autonomy of collective unconscious contents.
I think this is explained in the footnote too, the autofecundación interior, which is the reawakening of an ancestral soul. Or if I just literally translate it, an automatic inner fecundation, like automatically nourishing yourself within, so that you are able to step out of that collective into your own contribution back to that, which is then not pathological. That's evolution, individuation. But the getting lost in that, when basically the ground automatically churns. I mean, it's like like an inner rototiller going on, where some people get churned under by inner psychological events.
I see.
Whereas some people.
Joel joining us.
Oh, cool.
Okay, so let's go on. 234. We shall probably get nearest to the truth if we think of the conscious and personal psyche as resting upon the broad basis of an inherited and universal psychic disposition, which is as such unconscious, and that our personal psyche bears the same relation to the collective psyche as the individual to society. Okay, this comes up very interestingly in our play, where Rabbi Beck is talking about his name, the name Beck, which is a conflation kind of kuf and bet, I think, in Hebrew. And so Jung's response to his name is his name, because Jung knew something about Hebrew. He said that, these letters touch very, very deep layers of the unconscious. And so when we have things in our unconscious, they don't go away with the next generation. They're still there. And so all of us have these things which have deep layers to them. And Jung observes in that aspect of the play that Jung is a relatively new name that means young. And so he's reacting to a certain situation which he's trying to explain away why he reacted like a juvenile in a certain way.
Well, that's
young
interesting.
Means young, right?
Yes, and it's also interesting that he tried to get that feels like expert witness in trouble, trying to get a toehold on an opposing counsel.
Well, it definitely was that in the play. It's definitely that, where he's trying to uh, keep his head above water in a very deep discussion.
Yeah, because to me, for Jung to bring up something as simple as gematria, which is, the letter numerology and meanings of letters and names and the orders of letters, just simple gematria, it's science, but at the same time, for him, it would be such a minuscule endeavor. It almost would be saying, can you print? Can you spell in cursive? Can you write in capitals? I mean, can you count to 10? Because for him to come at Beck or Geffenbeck with gematria, that does feel like an act of, I've seen that in the mediation chamber. It's like, oh no, I just look down because I can't help my eyes just glistening with laughter. And like, oh man, they're on fire. We got a barbecue today. It's like, close that thing down and smoke them out. It's like, just don't interrupt them while they're making a mistake. Here they go.
That's right. So, that is what's happening in the play as well, where at that point in the conversation between Jung and Beck, Jung's in trouble,
which is rare for him too. So his practice on backpedaling, if he doesn't have any witty response, is somewhat unpracticed because he's not used. It's not right there in front of him. He's used to
he's not used to being the one on trial, and Beck is putting him on trial about certain things that he did. So
welcome, Joel.
Good night. Good night, Jordan. Good night. Good evening.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Okay, so
you mean to do 235?
Yeah, go ahead.
But equally, just as the individual is not merely a unique and separate being, but is also a social being, so the human psyche is not a self-contained and wholly individual phenomenon, but also a collective one. And just as certain social functions or instincts are opposed to the interests of single individuals, so the human psyche exhibits certain functions or tendencies which, on account of their collective nature, are opposed to individual needs. The reason for this is that every man is born with a highly differentiated brain and is thus assured of a wide range of mental functioning, which is neither developed ontogenetically nor acquired. But to the degree that human brains are uniformly differentiated, the mental functioning thereby made possible is also collective and universal. This explains, for example, the interesting fact that the unconscious processes of the most widely separated peoples and races show quite remarkable correspondence, which displays itself, among other things, in the extraordinary but well-authenticated analogies between the forms and motifs of autochthonous myths. The universal similarity of human brains leads to the universal possibility of a uniform mental functioning. This functioning is the italicized collective psyche. Inasmuch as there are differentiations corresponding to race, tribe, and even family, there is also a collective psyche limited to race, tribe, and family over and above the, in quotes, universal collective psyche. To borrow an expression from Pierre Janet, who had methods of learning, to borrow an expression from Pierre Janet, the collective psyche comprises the parties inférieures of the psychic functions. So that would be the interior contents or interior components. That is to say,
also inferior.
Oh, it is inferior, not interior. You're right. It is inferior.
Inferior parts of the psychic
So the
functions.
inferior parts of the psychic functions. Thank you. Not just interior. That would be vague and not what he's saying. That is to say, those deep-rooted, well-nigh automatic portions of the individual psyche, which are inherited and are to be found everywhere, and are thus impersonal or suprapersonal. Consciousness plus the personal unconscious constitutes the parties superiors of the psychic functions, whose portions, therefore, that are developed ontogenetically and acquired. Consequently, the individual who annexes the unconscious heritage of the collective psyche to what has accrued to him in the course of his ontogenetic development, as though it were a part of the latter, enlarges the scope of his personality in an illegitimate way and suffers the consequences. Insofar as the collective psyche comprises the parties inferiors of the psyche, of the psychic functions, and thus forms the basis of every personality, it has the effect of crushing and devaluing the personality. This shows itself either in the aforementioned stifling of self-conscious confidence, or else in an unconscious heightening of the ego's importance to the point of a pathological will to power, which we were discussing just a little bit ago.
Right. Okay. I can give a very clear example of this. Japanese people are, by and large, quite introverted and are comfortable with that because, among other things, many of them have to commute 3 hours a day to their job, but this introvertedness has always been there. This is why bonsai and other things got going in Japan. But this is sort of an amusing example, but there's this collective attitude in Japan that you're always bowing to somebody that you're talking to, okay? And there's this joke among Westerners who live in Japan that you've been in Japan too long when you start bowing into the telephone. because Japanese always do that, right? They always bow into the telephone. Right. But and this happened to me. I've seen it happen to every expatriate I know that spent more than, let's say, 3 years in Japan, where they just start bowing into the telephone, and it's just a collective habit that you just pick up unconsciously. Nobody tells you that Japanese expect that, and Japanese don't see it because you're bowing into the telephone. So they might see it now on a FaceTime or something, but most of the time they never saw you talking to them. And
that would be, here in America, and you see someone walk down the street and they're doing this while they're talking, they've got the gesture going on that would be just like in a conversation. And the bowing is similar to that.
Sure.
Because and that is culturally different. Their hands waving are not as a connective a gesture as the bowing. And so there's a more discipline of the ritual in the bowing than, in our wayward wind causing hands,
Yeah. I've found it difficult, for example, when we've been rehearsing our play through Zoom, because I couldn't gesture. My hand goes away and it's not in the
and doesn't influence the person right across the stage from you.
Right. And so I'm there, giving my lines, but it doesn't mean anything without physical gesture, but the gesture's out over here, and it's not in the scene, so it's not expressive. And I found that very difficult. And that's one example of the collective unconscious. And of course, the other one is this name thing. But Joel, do you want to talk about this at all, about collective layers in the psyche? Would you have an example in Brazil, for example, of layers of the psyche that are typically Brazilian?
That's a difficult task because Brazil is a miscegenation. I don't know if I am using the right word.
Well, it's
Uh,
yeah, miscegenation would be one of those verboten topics in the United States, I think. But
oh,
basically, you're talking about the mixing of the races and
yes,
and so
the
on.
mixing.
So there are so many different people that are Brazilian now that you've got the whole world in Brazil, like we have the whole world here in the United States too.
Yes,
You
yes,
know,
but
many people don't understand that there's a very large native population in Brazil, and there's also a very large Japanese Brazilian
yes,
group in Brazil, and these are people that were Japanese maybe in the 1880s, and then they started to go to Brazil and they started making coffee and growing coffee. The early ones were mainly truck farmers, vegetable farmers, and so on. And so the result is that, in the United States, we cannot get a good cup of coffee, but in Japan, you can get the best coffee. It's funny that in Japan, what we typically drink if we go to Starbucks or something like that, in Japan they call that American. Okay, American. And what they mean by that is sort of like dishwater coffee.
Yeah, it's like running water over burnt wood. It's like it turns a little brown. Not like
and so
Romanian
it's
coffee you could start a car with.
Yeah, it's very typical in Japan to have coffee that your spoon will stand up in, right? It's very strong coffee. And a lot of Americans can't handle it when they first get to Japan, but that phenomenon is because of the Japanese that went to Brazil in the 1880s, and they started to make a coffee culture in Japan even at that point. And so, especially after World War II, the Japanese coffee shop industry has become, even better than Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts.
You could start a car with it. I mean, that's my kind of coffee.
It's good coffee.
Where if you can't see light through it, that's a really good start. Well, this reminds me of Dr. John Jackson's, when he's talked about the cultural origins of our internal imagery. The bowing, the waving the hands. What's coffee? I mean, if you say coffee, and someone else who's Japanese says coffee, they mean something completely different.
Oh yeah. So anyway, does this ring true to you, Joel?
Well,
so you can't say there's anything typically Brazilian per
soccer.
se. Soccer. Okay, soccer is typically Brazilian.
Oh boy.
Okay. I grant you that.
I think that soccer is our religion or something like that. Every
Okay.
2 days you have a soccer match and many cups. Even in vacation, for example, you have 20 days of vacation.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end of January, the championship, state championship of Rio and São Paulo began, and finished the state championship, and then come Brazil Cup and Brazilian championship, and people play soccer in the beach, volley soccer. The Brazilian people is very creative with soccer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and when they say goal, like they're 50 L's, when they say goal,
yeah,
and just. And I saw a video this week that what would happen if you went to Augusta to the Golf Masters, and you went to Sao Paulo, Brazil, but you switched to commentators, and so they had the golf commentators doing the soccer really quietly, and they had the Brazilian soccer announcers doing the golf, so when they hit, which was it was just pretty hilarious, I think, because did you want to talk about energetic? I get it. I didn't realize 20 days off, but I mean, that's the soccer being so part of Brazilian culture.
So I want to share a poem that was written.
And there is something interesting that came to me now, because the place where the soccer player made the goal. I don't the posts, a gente, we call the where the when the ball, the soccer ball enter and make the goal. I forget the name in English.
Mm-hmm.
It's the goalpost or into the goal in the net.
In the net, it's a phenomenon, and I think that there's not very much explanation, but before a soccer match, a soccer player, you can see O's, OWLs, OWL in the net, near the net. You always have. It's not rare it's common to find a O and O sleeping in
really,
where the goalkeeper, yes, where the goalkeeper stay before the matches. Come and O and lands in near the goalkeeper, and when the match began, they fly away, and when the match finished, they come back. And
I didn't know that at all.
Well, that's definitely a cultural unconscious among owls.
Yes,
among Brazilian owls. Among Brazilian owls. Okay, so
Brazilian owls.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure it happens with American owls, but there's always the question of what is an American, and of course, a lot of people would point to me or me, and especially me without a mustache, and Jordan without a beard, and we would they would very easily identify us as an American. But anyway, there was this writing that an Australian dentist did back when there was big dust up between America and the Arab world. And so it's called To Kill an American. And I'll just share it with you. I'll put it on the screen and I want to make a point about it here in a moment. Okay, so To Kill an American, you probably missed this in the rush of news, but there was actually a report that someone in Pakistan had published in a newspaper an offer of a reward to anyone who killed an American, any American. So an Australian dentist wrote an editorial the following day to let everyone know what an American is, so they would know when they found one. Good one, mate. So anyway, here it is. An American is English or French or Italian, Irish, German, Spanish, Polish, Russian, or Greek. An American may also be Canadian, Mexican, African, Indian, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Australian, Iranian, Asian, or Arab, or Pakistani, or Afghan. An American may also be a Comanche, Cherokee, Osage, Blackfoot, Navajo, Apache, Seminole, or one of the many other tribes known as Native Americans. An American is Christian, or he could be Jewish, or Buddhist, or Muslim. In fact, there are more Muslims in America than there are in Afghanistan. The only difference is that in America, they are free to worship as each of them chooses. An American is also free to believe in no religion. For that, he will answer only to God, not to the government or to armed thugs claiming to speak for the government and for God. An American lives in the most prosperous land in the history of the world. The root of that prosperity can be found in the Declaration of Independence, which recognizes the God-given right of each person to the pursuit of happiness. An American is generous. Americans have helped out just about every other nation in the world in their time of need, never asking a thing in return. When Afghanistan was overrun by the Soviet army 20 years ago, Americans came with arms and supplies to enable the people to win back their country. As of the morning of September 11th, Americans had given more than any other nation to the poor in Afghanistan. Americans welcomed the best of everything, the best products, the best books, the best music, the best food, the best services, but they also welcomed the least. The national symbol of America, the Statue of Liberty, welcomes your tired and your poor, the wretched refuse of your teeming shores, the homeless tempest tossed. These, in fact, are the people who built America. Some of them were working in the Twin Towers the morning of September 11, 2001, earning a better life for their families. It's been told that the World Trade Center victims were from at least 30 different countries, cultures, and first languages, including those that aided and abetted the terrorists. So you can try to kill an American if you must. Hitler did. So did General Tojo and Stalin and Mao Zedong and other bloodthirsty tyrants in the world. But in doing so, you would just be killing yourself, because Americans are not a particular people from a particular place. They are the embodiment of the human spirit of freedom. Everyone who holds to that spirit everywhere is an American. And so, what I wanted to...
I really...
Go ahead, Jordan.
I was going to say that's the American owl on the goalpost. You know, it's everybody. So the owl, that really intrigues me, because owls typically are very, very good at finding place, not just space. And there must be so much energy around the goalpost from when the goals are scored, both positive and negative, that I bet you they're like, oh, look, it's a big nest. Look at the net. You know, it just turned the wrong way. But I love that. That's they like the American owl, the place of everyone and everything,
Yeah.
rather
And
than us and them. It's everybody is, there's a whole group of each culture.
yeah, and what I wanted to observe is that when you talk to people in the United States, and this is probably also heavily true in Brazil, I would suppose, if they've been here for more than 3 or 4 years, they become like the rest of the Americans that are already here. They become American. And you can't imagine these people ever going back to their original native country. They just
And they
won't.
become American in their own particular cultural way. You know, they
Right.
retain what's so cherished of themselves, and then they see, oh, look at the opportunity. I think I'll have that. And they
Yeah.
add in and layer in.
Right.
That fruitcake
And
example keeps coming to mind.
yeah, and it's very, very, very rare for people to want to go back. Okay. In other words, the Japanese who came to Brazil in the 1880s, they never went back to Japan. I don't know. Did they sympathize with Japan during World War II? Joel, I don't have any knowledge of the history of Japanese Brazilians during World War II. Or I don't have any knowledge about Brazil either, for that matter.
In World War II, there was the president of Brazil, Getúlio Vargas. He was an ally of Hitler.
He was an ally of Hitler.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
There was the National Socialist Party in my state, in the German colony, and General Getúlio Vargas, he was a dictator himself. And when he just broke, he put in Hitler's hands the wife of Luis Carlos Prestes. Her name was Olga, and she was a Jewish woman, a Russian Jewish woman that belonged to the Communist Party, and he put her in the hands of Hitler. He put her in a ship that traveled to Germany, and she died in Auschwitz. Getúlio Vargas just entered in the war against Hitler when the German army sinks 19 ships in Brazil. The war was coming, and there is a very Skip, you made a point. You are really a very sensitive person, because in my town, in Vitoria, there was no connection. For example, Vitoria was an island. The connection, there was no land connection. And the German people in the final of the 1920s,
Mm-hmm.
they give a bridge.
Mm.
8 ships came from the harbor of Hamburg, and they gave for free a bridge, and they built what we call the 5 bridges. And because and this was a connection to Vitória and Vila Velha. Vitória as an island with the land.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Nazi generals, even before Hitler was in the top of his power,
Mm-hmm.
they thought that the best place to invade Brazil, it was by the port of Vitória Harbor, in our island, because you can, from Vitória, you can go to the south, or you can go to the northeast, or you can reach, for example, the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave this Greek present because to us, because I think that the Hitler plan was wider than we thought, because they were planning to invade Brazil even before the invasion of Poland in 1939.
Yeah.
Because they think that the generals of Hitler thought that Brazilian people was inferior one, and they could invade and conquer easily Brazil, and so they built this bridge.
Does it still exist? Is that bridge still there?
Yes, yes.
So you use it.
And they still 20 years ago, more or less, the government of German, they want to buy this bridge. It's all steel made, all made with steel. And the lead of this steel is very rare. And they want to buy this bridge, the 5 bridges, and return with the steel to Germany to rediscover how they made such league of steel. And our government denied.
Yeah.
But there was a city, because, for example, in my state, Espírito Santo, there is a strong Italian colony. There is a colony of German people, the big ones, and also a city that speaks Dutch, a colony from Holland and from Russia too, a small city. And but there was a radio station in the city of Domingos Martins that communicated with Berlin before Brazil entered the war. And when there was a small colony of the Japanese, but when when the Germany sank these 19 Brazilian ships, he had to declare war against Germany and joined to the Allies. And
I didn't know any of that.
Yeah.
and then the Brazilian soldiers fought in Italy, in Castel Gandolfo.
In what? Say it
In
again.
Italy?
In Italy?
Castel Gandolfo.
Oh, Castel Gandolfo. Yeah.
Is in the south of
Yeah.
Italy.
Not
That
to be
was-
confused with Harry Potter and Gandalf.
No. This
No,
was
no.
The
no,
Gandolfo.
The Battle of Mount Castle. Mount
Yeah.
Castle.
Yeah, that was one of the bloodiest battles of the war, actually. And I never knew that there were Brazilians fighting there, though.
Wow.
So anyway, Justin makes a comment here. I've met a good deal of persons who have emigrated to USA who've over-adapted to become more American than most people born in the USA, which I have to concur that I run into such people fairly often.
Mhm.
And
Well, that goes along with this back and forth of the compensation, undercompensation, overcompensation. I mean, when some people, when they have been without something for so long and they see it, it becomes a birthday cake. I mean, they can't get enough of it in a way. So the over American, so to speak, where they lose their culture in a way. You know, it gets buried.
Yeah,
just
well,
from all the
they
news
start to do, and I have a son-in-law who was born in Korea, who was 4 years old when he came to the United States with his parents, and if you talk to him or my grandchildren on the telephone, you have no idea that they're of Korean American origin. You can't tell. You can't tell at all. They sound like Albany residents. And
I remember a Korean friend in Texas, and she had developed a Texas accent and with perfect English. And it was the strangest thing because she would also move her mouth wrong. Like she would talk like this, like she's with the Kung Fu movies, but she would have a Texas accent. So she kind of made fun of it, but she almost couldn't not. And she just absorbed it. I mean, so yeah, you can't tell. A whole language can change.
Right. And the whole culture can change, so that my grandchildren certainly, and my son-in-law and his brother, you just can't tell they're not, they haven't been in America for 100 years. With their parents, their father was a doctor, and so he and his wife, who were the ones that first came to the United States, they retain quite a lot of the Korean culture within them. But by the time their son, who was 4 years old when he came to the U.S., came up, you can't tell. I mean, and
well, when you went to MLI, the Military Language Institute, did you notice any internal movements or cultural feelings of change as you learned the Chinese language?
Say it again. I'm sorry.
When you went to MLI, the Military Language Institute,
DLI, Defense Language Institute.
DLI. Pardon.
Yeah.
Did you notice any internal, like within you, changes culturally, feelings by learning Chinese?
Assuredly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was spending all day, every day with a native Chinese speaker from Beijing who spoke Beijing Hua to us. She never spoke English to us. Okay. I mean,
okay.
we walked in the door the first day, and the first word out of her mouth was bow, bow, and it was up to us to figure out what the Bowger. So she said those two syllables, and we were expected to, work it out, and it. I think she probably held up a newspaper because Bowger means newspaper.
Bowser, yeah, right.
Yeah, Bowger. And
so you had a lot of it by immersion then.
Oh, it was total immersion. It was total immersion, right?
Yeah.
And the same with Japanese, because I ran a company in Japanese for 5 years.
Right.
Right. I mean, I used a lot of English, and I had a colleague who worked with me that did a lot of translating for me. But, by the end of it, I could read all of our books in Japanese and all of that. After 5 years, you do get it.
Mm-hmm.
And,
right.
Yeah. Yeah. So Justin says, my younger brother lived 2 decades in LA and then moved to Washington State is such a case. My cousin, who has lived in Florida since her mid-teenage years, now in her 50s, is not. So anyway, okay. So
we made some good progress tonight, I think.
Yeah, we did. What did we get to the end of? We got to the end of
2:35. So I wrote down resume at 2:36.
6.
Is that,
okay.
Yeah, 2:36. We resume next week.
Right. Okay. So this is 3:21. Okay, so we will resume next week. And Joel, thank you so much for joining us and sharing that information about Brazil. I never knew that.
Excellent story. That I didn't know any of that. The only thing I knew about Victoria was the beautiful waterfalls. I didn't know about the 5 bridges, and thank you.
Yeah, and we do know about. I guess it's Argentina, which had some relationships with the Germans, and the battleship that was that the Bismarck that was in Montevideo Harbor and got chased out and sunk ultimately. So
I'm not sure if it's a Bismarck, but that sounds right.
Yeah. Maybe it wasn't the Bismarck, but it was another of the major, the Graf Spee or something like that. One of the major battleships of the German fleet, and that was in Montevideo, which is that Uruguay or Argentina? Joel, do you remember? Montevideo.
Argentina.
Oh, it's in Argentina. Okay. So.
Oh, what? Repeat the action. The question.
The question is, where in what country is the city Montevideo?
Montevideo is the capital of Uruguay.
Uruguay. Okay, so it was in Uruguay. So anyway, okay. So peace, everyone.
All right.
We'll see you.
Peace.
Advanced reading group. We'll see you on Wednesday, and then Jordan and I are back in the box on Sunday.
Sunday morning. Yeah.
I mean that's really become a fun session for me.
I have to say, me too, because we're covering ground, but it's so inclusive, reaching out. I mean, the humor and then the depth, both. It's been just a joy, because it feels like we're literally playing gymnastically with the material in a way that is interesting. And I find that I learn new things each week because of that, of
Yeah.
You know, your stories, my stories, and I had things I hadn't even thought of that relate. So yeah, I'm
Right.
really
And
digging that.
I've been doing a very serious study again of the Red Book, which of course I've already read once online,
Right.
but I can't wait to start doing the reading and commentary on the Red Book, because there's so much juice in there. It's a very juicy book.
Well, completely. And that's to me
Indeed.
that was one of the 2 volumes in the, I can lose all the stuff, my stamp collection in the Move, all the stuff in the Move, but the 2 volume of the Temple of Man by Schwaller de Lubisch for the Temple of Luxor. It's a huge, you know, tome, double volume set. And then the Red Book. I'm like, I would love them to find it, and I pay whatever just to get those 2 back. And now I'm like, well, now I need to buy a new one. So before we start that after this.
You need to at least get a reader's edition. And
Well, I had them both. You know, I
right.
remember getting.
Yeah, you need both. You actually need both.
Yeah, I kind of the terror reader in me exhausted the Red Book standalone, and all of a sudden I'm like, well, what's the text say? What's the German? I want to, and you know, and I got the reader's edition, and it's like, oh, I was close, and then I was way off.
So Joel, do you have both the reader's edition and the folio edition of the Red Book?
I have the big
one,
the
folio,
one, and
right?
the small one.
Yeah, you have both. Yeah,
The
you
text.
have to have both. And my reader's edition is
dog-eared and tattered.
Oh man, that'll be a collector's item when I pass from this vale of tears.
They're more posted in lines than pages now.
Right. Well, I'm doing calligraphy off of it, and I said to myself, well, it'd be interesting to see if I could do every paragraph of the Red Book in calligraphy.
Oh, fun.
Wow.
And but for now, I'm just trying to take a few of the high points. And then I realize as I'm doing it that, oh, wait a minute, they're all high points.
Right. It's that's the thing. You got to dive in.
Right.
You're gonna graph the whole ocean, you know.
Yeah.
Nice.
And what I found, at one point I thought, okay, I'm going to tweet the Red Book, okay, paragraph by paragraph. Okay, I had that idea about a decade ago, and I started to do it, but I realized that in order to tweet it so that in my stream it would read in the right order, I had to put the last sentence of each paragraph first, and then the second to the last, and so on, so that the last one would be on top, or the first sentence would be on top, and
right.
Then read down, and so it only screws up the people who are actually watching at any given moment. But if they go check your timeline, it would be in the right order, right?
Right.
And so what I found out was that the Red Book makes absolutely exactly the same amount of sense if read backward.
Right. It's an anagram. Yeah, it's the ambigram anagram thing.
Right.
Like noon.
If you take every paragraph and start reading from the bottom up, you'll find that it makes just as much sense.
Well, it's even like ambigram, like noon, not just anagram. It's like noon is the same forwards, backwards, upside down, and right side up. I mean, you can spin it any way, and it's still capital N-O-O-N. You know, so yeah, that's funny that you realize that. I hadn't thought about that, but it's true. You read back through, and because he's playing with pure ideas, so you're basically, it's almost like if I pour my half and half in my coffee cup before I pour the coffee, or if I pour the coffee and then I pour the half and half, okay, yeah, I take the spoon and mix it, but that's the only difference. It's still the coffee.
Yeah.
That's So the sequence, it's interesting that the sequence really doesn't affect the content.
Yeah. So
Nice.
try that, Joel,
Yeah.
between now and Wednesday.
There is a curiosity about the Red Book because I talked to a librarian, and the Red Book in history, he belongs to the 8th century.
Mm.
The 800,
Mhm.
the 18th century, for his
Illustration, calligraphy, like the monks.
yes, the calligraphy, the dimensions or dimensions of the book, and it belongs to it's equal like the books written in the 18th century.
Huh, interesting. Okay, so I guess we kind of lost Jordan there. Maybe he just lost power for a moment or something. But anyway, Joel, thank you very much for joining us this evening. We'll see you again. And for everyone on YouTube, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much, Skip.
Yeah. So peace.